The billionaire only realized he loved his black maid when another man touched her. And he didn't just realize it. He broke. But nothing shattered him like the truth that followed. The woman scrubbing his floors was the daughter his family buried, the heir they erased, the rightful owner of half his empire. And the secret that kept her invisible for 26 years was about to burn every piece of the Reese legacy to ash. Makina Davis stood at the iron gates of the Reese estate, staring up at a mansion that looked more like a museum than a home. Cold. Perfect. Untouchable. She gripped the handle of her worn suitcase tighter, trying to steady the shaking in her chest. Her mother was gone. Callista Davis had passed 3 weeks ago, leaving Makina with nothing but bills, grief, and a job offer she couldn't refuse. The kind of offer desperate people take without asking questions. She walked through those gates not knowing her entire life was about to unravel. The estate was massive. Marble floors stretched endlessly. Crystal chandeliers hung like frozen waterfalls. Everything gleamed with a kind of wealth that felt illegal to touch. The head housekeeper, Mrs. Brennan, led Makina through hallways that smelled like old money and fresh lilies. "You keep your head down. You work quietly. You do not speak unless spoken to," Mrs. Brennan said, her voice sharp as glass. "And you stay out of Mr. Reese's private spaces, understood?" Makina nodded. She didn't plan on making noise. She just needed to survive. "Hi, viewers. Kindly tell us where you're watching from and what time it is. Warm welcome to the family. Enjoy the story." The first week passed like a blur. Makina cleaned rooms bigger than her entire childhood apartment. She polished silverware she'd never be allowed to eat with. She wiped down windows that overlooked gardens she'd never walk through. The staff barely looked at her. She was invisible, just another shadow moving through someone else's dream. But invisibility doesn't last when your presence disrupts someone's peace. It happened on a Thursday afternoon. Makina was cleaning the windows in the East Wing library, humming softly to herself. The same song her mother used to sing while folding laundry late at night. She didn't hear the door open, didn't hear the footsteps. She only felt the shift in the air. When Makina turned around, he was standing there, Elias Reese, tall, sharp jawline, eyes the color of cold steel. His suit fit him like armor, perfectly tailored, perfectly controlled. He didn't smile, didn't frown. He just stared at her like he'd walked into a room and found something that wasn't supposed to exist. Makina froze. "I didn't know anyone was in here," she said quietly, lowering her eyes. He didn't respond right away. He just stood there, studying her. His gaze moved over her face slowly, carefully, like he was trying to solve a puzzle he didn't realize he'd been given. Then he spoke. "What's your name?" His voice was low, steady, the kind of voice that expected answers. "Makina Davis, sir." He repeated it under his breath. "Makina." Something flickered in his expression, something she couldn't name. It wasn't anger, it wasn't curiosity. It was deeper, heavier, like recognition without memory. Makina's heart pounded so loud she thought he could hear it. Elias took one step closer, then another. The space between them shrunk until she could see the faint scar above his left eyebrow, until she could smell the faint cologne that clung to his shirt, until she could feel the weight of his attention pressing against her like gravity. "You're new," he said. "Yes, sir." "Why are you here?" The question felt loaded, like he wasn't asking why she worked at the estate. He was asking why she existed in his world at all. Makina swallowed hard. "I needed a job." Elias's eyes didn't leave hers. For a moment, the entire mansion felt silent. No footsteps, no voices, no clocks ticking. Just the two of them standing in a room full of books neither of them were reading. Then his phone buzzed. The spell broke. Elias blinked, stepped back, and pulled the phone from his pocket without looking at it. His expression hardened again. The walls came back up. "Finish your work," he said flatly. And he walked out. McKenna stood there, breath trembling, hands shaking against the window ledge. She didn't know what just happened, but she knew one thing for certain. Everything in her life had just shifted, and there was no going back. Elias Reese was not the kind of man people got close to. He built empires before most people finished college. He fired executives without blinking. He walked into boardrooms and left with signatures no one thought they'd give. Cold, calculated, untouchable. That's what the world called him. That's what he believed he was. Until McKenna. He told himself it was nothing. Just a moment. Just curiosity. Just the way sunlight hit her face through the library window. But moments don't follow you into meetings. Moments don't replay in your mind when you're supposed to be reviewing contracts. And moments don't make you search hallways you've never cared about before. Elias started noticing things he had no business noticing. The soft hum she made while dusting the grand staircase. The way she smiled politely at staff members who barely acknowledged her existence. The warmth she somehow brought into rooms that had been cold for decades. It irritated him, because he didn't want to notice. He had rules, boundaries, a life built on control. And McKenna Davis was not part of the plan. But the universe didn't care about his plans. Every time he turned a corner, she was there, cleaning a window, folding linens, carrying fresh flowers to rooms no one used. She never looked at him directly, never spoke unless spoken to. She moved through the estate like a ghost, trying not to be seen. And maybe that's why he couldn't stop looking. Have you ever been invisible to someone who had the power to see? You? That's what McKenna felt every single day. She scrubbed floors in a mansion worth more than her entire neighborhood. She served people who didn't know her name. She existed in a world that pretended she didn't. But Elias saw her, and she hated that she noticed. McKenna tried avoiding him. She switched her cleaning schedule. She took different hallways. She made sure to work in areas he rarely visited. But the mansion wasn't big enough to hide forever. One afternoon, she was polishing the marble banister near the main entrance when she heard his voice behind her. "You're always working." McKenna's breath caught. She turned slowly. Elias stood at the bottom of the stairs, hands in his pockets, expression unreadable. "Yes, sir," she said quietly. "That's what I'm paid to do." He studied her for a long moment. "You don't have to call me sir every time you speak. It's respectful. It's exhausting." McKenna didn't know how to respond to that, so she didn't. She just nodded and turned back to her work, hoping he'd walk away. He didn't. "What were you humming earlier?" he asked. Her hands froze on the cloth. "I didn't realize anyone was listening." "I was." The air between them felt heavy, too close, too aware. McKenna swallowed hard. "It's just an old song. My mother used to sing it." Elias's expression softened for half a second. Then the walls came back up. "It's nice," he said simply. And then he left. McKenna stood there, heart pounding, trying to understand what just happened. He wasn't supposed to care about her humming. He wasn't supposed to notice her at all. But he did. And that terrified her more than anything. The days blurred together after that. Elias didn't speak to her again, but she felt him watching, felt his presence even when he wasn't in the room. The staff started whispering. Mrs. Brennan gave her strange looks. Something was shifting in the estate and McKenna didn't know how to stop it. She just wanted to do her job. Keep her head down. Survive. But survival gets complicated when a billionaire starts seeing you as more than furniture. One night, McKenna finished her shift late. The mansion was quiet. Most of the staff had gone home. She was walking past the executive wing when she heard something that made her stop. A sound. Faint. Broken. Like someone trying not to cry. McKenna hesitated. She knew she wasn't supposed to be in this part of the house. Mrs. Brennan's rules echoed in her mind, but the sound didn't stop. It pulled at something deep inside her chest. She stepped closer. The door to Elias's office was cracked open, just enough for her to see inside, and what she saw shattered every assumption she had about the man who owned this mansion. Elias sat at his desk, head in his hands, shoulders shaking. Not from anger, not from frustration, from pain. Raw, unguarded, human. McKenna's breath caught in her throat. She should have walked away, should have pretended she never saw this, but her feet didn't move, and then, as if he felt her presence. Elias slowly lifted his head. His eyes were red, wet, broken, and they landed directly on her. McKenna stood frozen in the doorway, watching a man she thought was made of stone crack right in front of her. Elias didn't move, didn't speak. He just stared at her with red eyes that held more pain than any boardroom power play could ever hide. For a moment, neither of them breathed. Then McKenna did something she knew she shouldn't. She stepped inside. "Sir," she whispered, "are you all right?" The question hung in the air like something fragile, something that could shatter if either of them moved too fast. Elias blinked. Once. Twice. Like he was trying to remember how to be human again. His jaw tightened. His hands gripped the edge of the desk so hard his knuckles turned white. "I'm fine," he said, but his voice cracked on the word fine. McKenna didn't believe him, and he knew it. She took another step closer. Not too close. Just close enough to show she wasn't running. "You don't look fine." Elias let out a breath that sounded more like a broken laugh. "You should leave." "I should," McKenna agreed softly. "But I'm not going to." That's when something inside him broke completely. Elias looked down at his hands. His shoulders dropped. His whole body seemed to deflate like someone had pulled the plug on everything holding him together. "I lost something I can't replace," he whispered. McKenna's chest tightened. She didn't know what he lost. Didn't know if it was a person, a memory, or a piece of himself. But she understood loss. She knew what it felt like to carry weight no one else could see. "Then don't try to replace it," she said quietly. "Just try to understand it." Elias closed his eyes. Her voice didn't sound like advice. It sounded like relief, like someone had opened a window in a room that had been suffocating him for years. He didn't know why her words mattered. He didn't know why her presence felt like the first real breath he'd taken in months. All he knew was that for the first time since he could remember, he didn't feel completely alone. When he opened his eyes again, McKenna was still standing there, calm, steady, not afraid of his brokenness, and that terrified him more than any business deal ever had. "Why are you still here?" he asked, voice raw. McKenna hesitated. "Because I know what it's like to lose everything. And I know how hard it is when people pretend they don't see it." Elias stared at her. Really stared. Not the way he looked at contracts or competitors. He looked at her like she was the first person in his life who ever told him the truth. "Thank you," he whispered. McKenna nodded. She didn't say anything else. She didn't need to. She just turned and walked out of the office, leaving him sitting in the dark with her words echoing in his mind. And for the first time in years, Elias Reese didn't feel like a machine. He felt human. That night, McKenna didn't sleep. She kept replaying the moment in her head, the brokenness in his eyes, the vulnerability in his voice, the way he looked at her like she mattered. She didn't want to matter to him. She couldn't afford to, but the universe had already decided otherwise. The next morning, the estate was buzzing. Staff members whispered in corners. Maids exchanged knowing glances. The butler walked past McKenna with a strange look she couldn't decipher. Something had shifted overnight, something everyone felt but no one said out loud. And then McKenna saw it. Elias, walking through the hallways, looking. Not at documents, not at his phone, not at anything related to business. He was looking for someone. Mrs. Brennan noticed it first. She stood near the main staircase, arms crossed, watching Elias move through the mansion like a man searching for something he lost. "What is he doing?" one of the younger maids whispered. Mrs. Brennan's expression tightened. "Something he shouldn't." McKenna felt her stomach drop, because she knew. She knew exactly who he was looking for, and when Elias finally turned the corner and his eyes locked onto hers, the entire mansion seemed to hold its breath. He didn't say anything. He didn't have to. The look in his eyes said everything. And every single staff member in that hallway saw it. The whispers started before breakfast. By noon, every staff member in the Reese estate knew something impossible had happened. Elias Reese, the man who barely acknowledged their existence, had spent an entire morning searching the mansion for a maid. Not just any maid. McKenna Davis. The kitchen staff leaned over counters, exchanging glances. The gardeners paused their work to gossip near the fountain. Even the security team at the front gate were talking about it. "I've worked here 15 years, one of the older housekeepers said, shaking her head. "Never seen him look for anyone like that." "It's inappropriate," Mrs. Brennan muttered under her breath. "She's been here less than a month." "Maybe he just needed to ask her something," another maid offered weakly. Mrs. Brennan's eyes narrowed. Men like Elias Reese don't search hallways for staff questions. And she was right, because whatever happened between Elias and McKenna the night before had cracked something open that couldn't be closed again. McKenna felt it immediately. The way people looked at her changed overnight. Some staff members nodded at her with cautious respect. Others avoided her completely, like she carried something contagious. A few stared at her with barely hidden resentment. She hated all of it. She didn't ask for attention, didn't want to be noticed. She just wanted to work, get paid, and disappear into her small room at the end of each day. But the mansion had other plans. Strange things started happening. Doors that were always locked suddenly stood open. Documents appeared in places they didn't belong. Old filing cabinets in the archive room sat slightly ajar, like someone had been searching through them recently. McKenna noticed it all. And the strangest part? She felt watched. Not by Elias, by the house itself. It sounds crazy, right? But have you ever walked into a room and felt like the walls knew your name? Like the air was holding its breath, waiting for you to discover something you weren't supposed to find. That's what McKenna felt every single day. She tried ignoring it, tried focusing on her work, but the feeling never left. One afternoon, Mrs. Brennan assigned McKenna to organize the estate's archives. A dusty room filled with decades of records, contracts, and family history no one cared about anymore. "Sort everything by year," Mrs. Brennan said curtly, "and don't touch anything you're not supposed to." McKenna nodded and got to work. The archive room smelled like old paper and forgotten time. Shelves stretched from floor to ceiling, packed with leather binders and yellowing files. McKenna pulled on a pair of gloves and started sorting through the stacks. Hours passed, her back ached, her eyes burned, but she kept going. And then she found it. A file tucked behind a row of tax documents. Thin, unremarkable. Except for the name written on the tab in faded ink, Callista Davis. McKenna's breath stopped. Her mother's name. Her hands trembled as she pulled the file free. Her heart pounded so hard she thought it might break through her ribs. Why was her mother's name in the Reese Estate archives? McKenna glanced at the door. No one was around. The hallway outside was silent. She opened the file. Inside were letters, handwritten, old. Some of the ink had bled through the paper, but the words were still clear enough to read. And what McKenna read made her entire world tilt sideways. The first letter was addressed to Arthur Reese, Elias's father. It started with two words that made McKenna's stomach drop. "My love." Her mother had written love letters to Arthur Reese. McKenna's vision blurred. Her hands shook so violently she almost dropped the file. She flipped through the pages, scanning frantically. There were dozens of letters, some from her mother, some from Arthur, all of them hidden, all of them secret. And then she found the one that shattered everything, a letter her mother wrote when she was pregnant. With her. McKenna's breath came in shallow gasps. Her chest tightened. Tears burned behind her eyes. The words on the page confirmed what she never wanted to believe. Arthur Reese wasn't just some billionaire her mother worked for. He was her father. McKenna stumbled backward, the file slipping from her fingers and scattering across the floor. She pressed her hand against her mouth, trying to stop the sob rising in her throat. Her entire life had been a lie. Her mother never told her, never explained, never gave her the truth. And now McKenna stood in a mansion that should have been her home, working as a maid in a family that was supposed to be hers. Her knees buckled. She sank to the floor, surrounded by letters that rewrote her entire existence. And then she heard footsteps, slow, steady, coming closer. McKenna looked up, tears streaming down her face. The door creaked open, and standing in the doorway, pale and shaking, was the house manager. His eyes locked onto the scattered letters on the floor, then onto McKenna, and he whispered the words that confirmed her worst fear. "You weren't supposed to find that." McKenna couldn't breathe. The letters lay scattered across the archive floor like pieces of a life she never knew existed. Her mother's handwriting stared back at her from yellowed pages, each word a knife twisting deeper into her chest. She picked up another letter with trembling hands. This one was different, longer, more desperate. It was dated 26 years ago, the year McKenna was born. "Arthur," the letter began. "I'm writing this because I don't know how much time we have left. They're watching me. The board knows about us, about her. They've made it clear that if I don't leave, they'll destroy everything you've built. They'll ruin your name, your legacy, everything your family stands for." McKenna's throat tightened. "I can't let that happen. So I'm leaving. I'm taking our daughter far away from this place, far from the Reese name, far from the people who think she doesn't deserve to exist." Tears blurred the words, but McKenna forced herself to keep reading. "I need you to understand something. This isn't your fault. You tried to fight for us. You tried to bring me into your world. But your world doesn't want people like me. It doesn't matter how much you love me. It doesn't matter that we created a life together. To them, I'm just a mistake that needs to disappear." McKenna's hands shook so hard the paper rattled. "So, I'm disappearing. For you. For her. For the empire you're supposed to protect. But know this, Arthur. Our daughter is not a mistake. She's the best thing we ever made. And one day when she's old enough to understand, I'll tell her the truth. I'll tell her that her father loved her, even if he couldn't keep her." The letter ended with 3 words that broke McKenna completely. "I loved you." McKenna collapsed against the shelves, sobbing into her hands. Everything she thought she knew about her life was a lie. Her mother didn't fail. She was forced out, banished, erased. And McKenna? She was the secret the Reese family buried so deep they convinced themselves she never existed. She wasn't just some random girl who needed a job. She was the heir, the firstborn. The daughter Arthur Reese wanted but couldn't protect. The wealth Elias inherited? Half of it was supposed to be hers. The mansion she cleaned? She should have grown up in it. The life she struggled through, watching her mother work herself to death, living paycheck to paycheck, drowning in bills, that was engineered, designed, orchestrated by people who decided her existence was inconvenient. McKenna's chest heaved with rage and grief so deep she thought it might swallow her whole. Her mother died believing she did the right thing. Died, thinking she protected McKenna by keeping her away, but all she did was rob her of the truth. And the Reese family? They took everything. McKenna wiped her face with shaking hands and stood up. Her legs felt weak, but anger kept her upright. She grabbed another file, then another. Each one revealed more. bank records showing payments made to her mother, hush money, silence fees, legal documents detailing a settlement agreement. Her mother signed away any claim to the Reese estate in exchange for a lump sum that barely lasted 5 years. Notes from board meetings discussing how to handle the situation discreetly. One line stood out. The child cannot be acknowledged. Ever. Makina's vision blurred with fresh tears. They didn't just erase her mother, they erased her, before she even had a chance to exist in their world. And now she was standing in that world, invisible all over again, cleaning the floors of a mansion that should have been her home. The injustice of it all pressed down on her like a weight she couldn't lift. Her mother worked herself to death. For what? To protect a family that never cared, to keep a secret that only hurt them both. Makina sank back to the floor, clutching the letters to her chest, sobbing so hard her whole body shook. She didn't hear the footsteps, didn't hear the door open. She only heard the voice, soft, trembling, afraid. You weren't supposed to find that. Makina's head snapped up. The house manager stood in the doorway, face pale, eyes wide with something that looked like panic and guilt mixed together. He stared at the letters scattered on the floor, then at Makina, and his voice cracked when he spoke again. Oh, God. You know. The house manager's face went white as a sheet. Makina stared at him, chest heaving, tears still streaming down her face. She clutched the letters so tight the paper crumpled in her fists. You knew, she whispered, her voice cracked. You all knew. The manager swallowed hard. He looked like a man caught between guilt and fear, trapped in a truth he'd been hiding for decades. Where did you find those? He asked quietly. Makina's eyes burned. Does it matter? He opened his mouth, closed it, then sighed like the weight of the world had finally caught up to him. Yes, he said softly. It matters, because those files were supposed to be destroyed years ago. Makina's breath hitched. Destroyed? Why? To cover up what your family did to my mother? The manager flinched. It's not that simple. Then make it simple, Makina snapped, standing up. Her legs shook, but she didn't care. Tell me the truth. All of it. He hesitated, then stepped inside and closed the door behind him. Your mother, he began slowly, worked here long before you were born. She wasn't just a maid, she was loved by many of us. Kind, smart, strong. And Arthur Reese saw that too. Makina's throat tightened. He fell in love with her, the manager continued. Really loved her. Not some secret affair. He wanted to marry her, bring her into the family, make it official. But the board didn't let him, Makina finished bitterly. The manager nodded. The Reese family isn't just wealth, it's legacy, tradition, power. The board controls everything, and they saw your mother as a threat, not because of who she was, but because of what she represented. Change, Makina whispered. Exactly. The manager rubbed his face, exhausted. They told Arthur that if he married her, they'd dismantle everything, pull funding, destroy partnerships, ruin the family name. They gave him an ultimatum, the empire or her. Makina felt sick, and he chose the empire. No, the manager said firmly. He chose you. Makina froze. Arthur wanted to fight, he explained, but your mother stopped him. She knew what it would cost. She knew the board would destroy him. So she left, took the settlement, disappeared, and made him promise never to come looking. Tears spilled down Makina's cheeks again. She sacrificed everything. She did, the manager said quietly. And it broke Arthur. He was never the same after she left. He built the empire bigger, richer, more powerful. But he was empty inside. Makina's voice trembled. And you all just watched. You knew I existed. You knew my mother was out there struggling. And none of you said anything. The manager's eyes filled with tears. We were scared. The board made it clear. Anyone who spoke about Callista or her child would be fired, silenced, erased just like she was. McKenna's hands balled into fists. So you protected yourselves. He nodded, ashamed. I'm sorry. We all are. But fear makes people do terrible things. Have you ever realized that the people who stay silent when something's wrong are just as guilty as the ones who caused the pain? That's what McKenna felt standing there. Betrayal from ghosts, from people who smiled at her mother every day and said nothing when she was forced to leave. She died thinking she did the right thing, McKenna whispered. She died alone. Broke. Believing no one cared. The manager's voice cracked. Arthur cared. Until the day he died, he cared. He kept those letters because he couldn't let her go. McKenna looked down at the scattered papers, her mother's handwriting, Arthur's replies. Love trapped in ink and silence. Where's Arthur now? She asked. Dead, the manager said softly. 3 years ago. Heart attack. McKenna's chest tightened. Did he ever try to find me? The manager hesitated, then nodded. Once, when you were 16, he hired investigators, found out where you lived, watched you from a distance. McKenna's breath caught. He saw me? Yes, but he didn't approach you. Your mother made him promise, and he kept it, even though it destroyed him. McKenna pressed her hand against her mouth, trying to hold back a sob. Her father knew she existed, watched her, loved her, and never said a word. The cruelty of it all was suffocating. She turned away from the manager, trying to pull herself together, but the pain was too deep, too raw. Does Elias know? She asked quietly. No, the manager said. Arthur never told him. He didn't want Elias to carry the guilt. McKenna laughed bitterly. So I'm the only one who has to carry it. Before the manager could respond, footsteps echoed in the hallway outside. Slow, steady, familiar. McKenna's entire body went rigid. The door opened, and Elias Reese stood in the doorway, eyes locked onto the letters scattered across the floor, then onto McKenna's tear-stained face, then onto the house manager, who looked like he wanted to disappear. Elias's jaw tightened. His expression was unreadable, but his voice was low, controlled, dangerous. What's going on? Elias stood frozen in the doorway, staring at the letters scattered across the floor like shattered glass. His eyes moved from the papers to McKenna's face. Her tears, her trembling hands, the devastation written all over her. Then to the house manager, who looked like he'd been caught hiding a body. I asked a question, Elias said, voice low and dangerous. What is going on? The manager opened his mouth, but no words came out. McKenna didn't give him the chance. She picked up one of the letters and held it out to Elias with shaking hands. Read it. Elias hesitated, then stepped forward and took the letter from her. His eyes scanned the page, and with every word the color drained from his face. My love, Arthur, our daughter. Elias's breath stopped. He flipped through more letters. Faster. Desperate. His jaw clenched tighter with each page. When he finally looked up, his voice came out as barely a whisper. What is this? McKenna's eyes burned into his. The truth your family buried. Elias shook his head slowly, like he was trying to wake up from a nightmare. This can't be real. It is, McKenna said, voice breaking. My mother wrote those letters. To your father, Arthur Reese. Elias stared at her, confusion and horror flooding his face. I don't understand. Your father loved my mother, McKenna said, tears streaming down her cheeks. They were together. She got pregnant, with me. The words hit Elias like a punch to the chest. The board found out, McKenna continued, voice trembling with rage. They forced her to leave, paid her off, erased her, made her disappear so the Reese name wouldn't be tainted. Elias's hands trembled. No, that's not possible. It's all in those letters, McKenna said, pointing at the scattered papers. Every lie, every secret, every moment your family chose power over people. Elias looked down at the letters again. His breathing turned shallow, uneven. "McKenna," he whispered. "If this is true, then your sister," she finished coldly. Half-sister, the daughter Arthur Reese had but couldn't keep, the heir no one wanted to acknowledge. The silence in the room was deafening. Elias stumbled backward, gripping the edge of a table for support. His entire world had just collapsed. Everything he believed about his family, his father, his legacy, all of it was built on a lie. He looked at McKenna with wide, horrified eyes. "I didn't know. I swear to God I didn't know." McKenna's voice cracked. "But your family did. Everyone did. And they let my mother suffer. They let me grow up in poverty while you lived in this mansion that should have been mine too." Elias shook his head, tears filling his eyes. "McKenna, I had no idea. My father never told me. He never said anything." "Because he was a coward," McKenna spat, "just like everyone else in this house." The manager flinched but said nothing. Elias stepped toward her, desperate. "McKenna, please. I'm not them. I'm not my father. I didn't do this." "But you benefited from it," McKenna shot back. "Every dollar you inherited, every door that opened for you, every privilege you've had your entire life, it all came from raising people like my mother, like me." Elias's face crumpled. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry." "Sorry doesn't bring her back," McKenna whispered. "Sorry doesn't fix 26 years of lies." She turned away, wiping her face with trembling hands. Elias stood there, shattered. He didn't know what to say. Didn't know how to undo decades of damage he didn't even know existed. All he knew was that the woman standing in front of him, the woman he was beginning to care about more than he'd ever admit, had been destroyed by his family, and there was nothing he could do to fix it. McKenna picked up the letters and shoved them into her bag. Her movements were sharp, angry, final. "Where are you going?" Elias asked, panic creeping into his voice. "Anywhere but here," McKenna said. "McKenna, wait." "Don't," she cut him off, voice cold. "Don't try to stop me. Don't try to fix this. Just let me go." Elias's throat tightened. "I can't." McKenna turned to face him, eyes blazing with pain. "Why not?" "Because Elias stopped, the words caught in his throat. Because he was falling for her, and he didn't even realize it until this moment, until the thought of losing her felt like losing the only real thing in his life. But how could he say that? How could he tell her he cared when his family was the reason she'd suffered her entire life? McKenna stared at him, waiting for an answer he couldn't give. When the silence stretched too long, she shook her head and turned toward the door. "McKenna," Elias whispered desperately. She didn't stop. She walked out of the archive room, out of the mansion, and out of his life. Elias stood there, frozen, surrounded by letters that rewrote everything he thought he knew. The house manager watched him carefully. "Sir, what do you want me to do?" Elias didn't answer. He couldn't. Because for the first time in his life, Elias Reese didn't have control. He didn't have answers. All he had was the crushing realization that he was falling in love with the woman his family destroyed, and he had no idea how to fix it. Elias didn't sleep that night. He locked himself in his office and tore through every file, every document, every piece of family history he could find. His hands moved fast, desperate, like if he searched hard enough, he'd find proof that it was all a mistake, that McKenna was wrong, that his father wasn't the man those letters described. But the more he dug, the worse it got. Bank records showed monthly payments to Callista Davis for years, hush money disguised as consulting fees, legal contracts with clauses about confidentiality and non-disclosure, settlement agreements signed under pressure. And then he found the board meeting notes, dated 26 years ago, the same year McKenna was born. Elias's stomach turned as he read the cold, clinical language. Subject, Arthur Reese, and staff member Callista Davis. Issue, pregnancy, potential scandal. Resolution, immediate termination. Financial settlement, legal binding to prevent future claims. They discussed his father's love like it was a business problem. They discussed McKenna like she was a liability, not a child, not a human being, just something to be erased. Elias slammed the file shut, breathing hard. His entire life had been built on this. The wealth he inherited, the power he wielded, the respect people gave him. All of it came from burying a woman and her daughter. He felt sick. Have you ever woken up one day and realized everything you believed about yourself was based on someone else's pain? That's what Elias felt. The weight of a legacy he didn't build but was forced to carry. He grabbed his phone and called the house manager. "I need names," Elias said the moment the man answered. Everyone who was on that board. Everyone who knew about Callista and stayed silent. The manager hesitated. "Sir, some of those people are still—" "I don't care," Elias cut him off. "I want names. Now." Within an hour, Elias had a list. 12 people. Some were retired. Some still held positions in the company. A few were dead. But they all knew. They all chose silence. Elias stared at the names, rage building in his chest. These people smiled at him at board meetings, shook his hand, congratulated him on his success. And the whole time they were hiding the fact that he had a sister, that his father had loved someone the family decided wasn't good enough, that McKenna grew up in poverty while they lived in mansions built on her erasure. Elias's hands shook. He wanted to burn it all down. The company, the estate, the legacy. Every brick of it was soaked in lies, but burning it down wouldn't bring McKenna's mother back, wouldn't undo the years of pain, wouldn't fix the damage already done. So what could he do? He picked up his phone again and called his lawyer. "I need you to pull every legal document related to Arthur Reese and Callista Davis," Elias said. "Everything. Contracts, settlements, payments. I want it all on my desk by morning." The lawyer paused. "Sir, may I ask why?" "Because I'm about to undo the biggest mistake this family ever made," Elias said quietly. He hung up before the lawyer could respond. Elias leaned back in his chair, staring at the ceiling. His mind kept replaying McKenna's face, the pain in her eyes, the way her voice broke when she said, "Your family destroyed my mother." He didn't do it, but he benefited from it. And that guilt was suffocating. For the first time in his life, Elias Reese didn't know what to do. He built empires, closed billion-dollar deals, controlled boardrooms with a single sentence. But he couldn't fix this. He couldn't undo decades of silence. He couldn't bring back the woman his father loved, and he couldn't stop McKenna from walking away. The thought of losing her felt like drowning, which was insane. They barely knew each other. She worked for him for less than a month, but something about her presence in his life had cracked open a part of him he didn't know existed. Her warmth, her strength, her refusal to be invisible even in a world designed to erase her. She made him feel human. And now, she was gone. Elias pressed his palms against his eyes, trying to stop the pressure building behind them. He didn't cry. He never cried. But tonight, he came close. Hours passed. The mansion stayed silent. Elias sat in the dark, surrounded by files that proved everything McKenna said was true, and for the first time in his life, he understood what it felt like to be powerless. Then, just before dawn, a soft knock sounded at the door. Elias lifted his head. "Come in." A young maid stepped inside, face pale and nervous. "Sir," she said quietly, "I thought you should know." Elias straightened. "Know what?" The maid swallowed hard. "McKenna's gone. She left the estate. Elias's heart stopped. When? He asked, voice tight. A few hours ago. She packed her things and didn't tell anyone where she was going. Elias stood up so fast his chair fell backward. Find her, he said. The maid blinked. Sir? I don't care what it takes, Elias said, voice shaking. Find her. Elias moved through the mansion like a man possessed. He stormed through hallways, through open doors, demanded answers from every staff member he could find. Where did she go? He asked the butler. I don't know, sir. When did she leave? Around 3 a.m. Did she say anything? Leave a note? Anything? The butler shook his head. Nothing, sir. She just packed her bag and walked out the front gate. Elias felt panic rising in his chest. He grabbed his phone and dialed McKenna's number. It rang once, then disconnected. He tried again. Same thing. The third time, a recorded message played. The number you have dialed is no longer in service. Elias's hand shook. She'd turned off her phone or changed her number. Either way, she didn't want to be found. He called his security team. Pull footage from every camera on the estate. I need to know which direction she went. Within minutes, they had it. McKenna had walked to the main road and caught a taxi heading toward the city. After that, the trail went cold. Elias paced his office. Running, his hands through his hair, he tried everything, called taxi companies, checked bus stations, train terminals, even airports. Nothing. She'd vanished like smoke, and with every passing hour the weight in his chest grew heavier. Elias had built an empire on control. He knew how to track competitors, how to find leaks, how to locate anyone who tried to hide from him. But McKenna wasn't a business rival. She was a woman who had every reason to disappear, and he had no right to chase her. But that didn't stop him from trying. He hired private investigators, offered money to anyone with information, sent people to every neighborhood in the city where she might have gone. Still nothing. It was like McKenna Davis had never existed, just like the Reese family had done to her mother. The irony wasn't lost on him. Elias collapsed into his chair, exhausted. He hadn't slept in 2 days, hadn't eaten, hadn't stopped moving since the moment he found out she was gone. And for the first time in his life, Elias Reese felt completely powerless. All the money in the world couldn't bring her back. All the influence he had couldn't undo the damage his family caused. All the control he built his life on meant absolutely nothing, because the one person he wanted to find didn't want to be found, and he couldn't blame her. He stared at the files still scattered across his desk. The letters, the contracts, the proof of everything his family did to destroy hers. How could he expect her to forgive him? How could he expect her to trust him? He was a Reese, and the Reese name had taken everything from her. Elias pressed his palms against his eyes, trying to hold himself together, but the cracks were spreading. The armor he wore his entire life was breaking, and underneath it, he was just a man drowning in guilt he didn't know how to carry. The door to his office creaked open. Elias didn't look up. I said I didn't want to be disturbed. I know, sir, the house manager said quietly, but there's something you need to see. Elias lifted his head, irritation flashing across his face. Unless it's about McKenna, I don't care. The manager stepped inside, carrying an old leather briefcase. Elias frowned. What is that? It belonged to your father, the manager said. We found it in storage. It was locked for years, but this morning the lock broke. Elias stared at the briefcase. He'd never seen it before. The manager set it carefully on the desk. I think he wanted you to have this. Eventually. Elias reached out slowly and opened the latch. Inside were more letters, documents, photos, and something else. A small wooden box. Elias picked it up. It was heavier than it looked. Something rattled inside when he moved it. He glanced at the manager. What is this? The manager shook his head. I don't know. Your father never told anyone. Elias set the box down and opened the briefcase wider. The first thing he saw was a photo. A young woman with dark skin and a bright smile standing in front of the Reese estate. She wore a simple dress and held flowers in her hands. Elias's breath caught. It was Callista, McKenna's mother. And she looked so much like McKenna it hurt. Underneath the photo was a handwritten letter. The ink was faded, the paper worn, but the words were still clear, Arthur's handwriting. Elias picked it up with trembling hands and began to read, and with every word, his entire world shattered all over again. Because this letter wasn't written to Callista, it was written to McKenna, and it started with 4 words that made Elias's heart stop. My dearest daughter, forgive me. Elias stared at the letter, hands trembling so badly the paper shook. My dearest daughter, forgive me. He read it again. Then again. Like the words might change if he looked hard enough. But they didn't. His father had written a letter to McKenna. A letter she was never supposed to see. Elias's throat tightened as he forced himself to keep reading. If you're reading this, it means I'm gone. And it means I failed you in every way a father can fail his child. I won't ask you to understand. I won't ask you to forgive me. I just need you to know the truth. I loved your mother more than I've ever loved anything in my life. She wasn't just beautiful. She was light, warmth, everything this cold family never understood. When I met her, I finally understood what it meant to be alive. Elias's vision blurred, but the board wouldn't allow it. They saw her as a threat, not because of who she was, but because of what she represented. Change, disruption, a crack in the foundation they spent generations building. They gave me an ultimatum, the Empire or her, and I was a coward, McKenna. I chose wrong. Elias gripped the edge of the desk, trying to steady himself. Your mother left to protect me. To protect you. She knew they would destroy everything if she stayed. So she sacrificed her happiness, her future, her place in this family, and I let her. I told myself it was for the best, that you'd be safer away from this world, that Callista would find peace somewhere else. But I was lying to myself, because every day without her felt like dying slowly, and every year that passed I thought about you, my daughter, growing up without me, without knowing that I wanted you, that I would have given up everything if I'd been brave enough. Elias's hands shook harder. I tried to find you once. When you were 16. I hired investigators. Found out where you lived. I saw you from a distance. You were laughing with friends outside a small apartment building. You looked so much like your mother it broke me, but I didn't approach you. Callista made me promise. And even after all the pain I caused her, I kept that promise. I'm writing this now because I'm dying. The doctors say I have months, maybe less, and I can't leave this world without you knowing the truth. You were wanted, McKenna, you were loved. You are my daughter, and this empire, this wealth, this legacy everyone fights over, half of it was always supposed to be yours. Elias stopped breathing. I've prepared legal documents, hidden them where only someone who cares enough will find them. If you're reading this, it means someone did. Tell her, whoever you are. Tell McKenna Davis that her father never stopped loving her, that he was too weak to fight for her, that he spent every day of his miserable life regretting the choice he made, and tell her, I'm sorry. The letter ended with a single line. All my love, Arthur. Elias dropped the letter like it burned him. He stood there, chest heaving, tears streaming down his face. His father loved her, really loved her, and he died carrying that guilt. Elias understood now. The distance in his father's eyes, the coldness that never quite made sense, the way Arthur threw himself into work like he was running from something. He was running from regret, from the daughter he abandoned, from the woman he let go, and now that daughter was out there somewhere, alone, thinking no one ever wanted her, thinking she was a mistake, when the truth was she was the only real thing his father ever loved. Have you ever lost someone before you even got the chance to know them? That's what Arthur lived with. And now Elias understood the weight of it. He wiped his face roughly and pulled out his phone. His hands were still shaking, but his mind was clear. He knew what he had to do. Elias scrolled through his contacts and found his lawyer's number. The call connected on the second ring. "Mr. Reese," the lawyer answered, sounding surprised. "It's early. Is everything all right?" "No," Elias said quietly. "But it will be." The lawyer paused. "What do you need?" Elias took a deep breath. "I need you to prepare paperwork, immediately." "What kind of paperwork?" Elias's voice didn't waver. "I'm stepping down as CEO of Reese Enterprises." Silence. "Sir," the lawyer said carefully, "did I hear you correctly?" "You did," Elias said, "and I'm transferring half of my shares. Half of everything." The lawyer's voice rose in panic. "To who?" Elias closed his eyes. "To McKenna Davis, Arthur Reese's daughter, my sister." The line went dead silent. Then the lawyer spoke, voice shaking. "Sir, with all due respect, are you sure about this?" "I've never been more sure of anything in my life," Elias said. "But the board—" "I don't care about the board," Elias cut him off. "I don't care about the legacy. I don't care about protecting a system built on lies." His voice cracked. "I care about doing what my father should have done 26 years ago." The lawyer hesitated. "This will destroy the company as you know it." "Good," Elias said. "It deserves to be destroyed." He hung up before the lawyer could argue. Elias set the phone down and stared at the letter still lying on his desk. His father's confession, his father's regret, his father's final plea. "Tell her I'm sorry," Elias whispered into the empty room. "I will." By morning, the Reese empire was on fire. Not literally, but it might as well have been. Elias moved faster than anyone expected, faster than the board could react, faster than the lawyers could stop him. He called an emergency meeting at 6 in the morning. Every board member sat around the conference table, confused and irritated at being summoned so early. Elias walked in wearing a suit but no tie. His eyes were bloodshot from lack of sleep, but his voice was steady, clear, final. "I'm stepping down as CEO of Reese Enterprises, effective immediately." The room exploded. "You can't be serious." "Elias, think about what you're doing. This is insane." Elias raised his hand, and the room went silent. "I'm also returning my controlling shares to be redistributed," he continued. "Half of everything I own will be transferred to McKenna Davis, Arthur Reese's daughter, my sister." One of the older board members stood up, face red with anger. "Arthur Reese had no other children. This is ridiculous." Elias pulled out the letters, the documents, the proof. He slammed them onto the table. "Read them," he said coldly. "Every word, every lie, every secret this board buried for 26 years. No one moved. "Read them," Elias repeated, voice sharp as a knife. One by one, the board members picked up the papers, and as they read, the color drained from their faces. "This can't be real," someone whispered. "It is," Elias said. "My father loved Callista Davis. She was pregnant with his child, and you all forced her out to protect your precious legacy." The room went deathly quiet. "So here's what's going to happen," Elias continued. "Anyone who was on the board when this decision was made, you're fired, effective immediately. Anyone who knew about this and stayed silent, also fired." Panic spread through the room. "You can't do this," one of them said desperately. "I just did," Elias said. "Security will escort you out. Don't bother fighting it. I have lawyers ready to bury you if you try." The board members looked at each other, horrified. But Elias wasn't finished. "And one more thing," he said. "Every policy, every contract, every decision made to erase Callista Davis and her daughter, we're undoing all of it, publicly, with full transparency." Someone gasped. "That will destroy the company's reputation." "Good," Elias said. "This company doesn't deserve a reputation built on erasing people." He turned and walked out of the room, leaving chaos behind him. Within hours, the news spread. Financial websites ran headlines. Business analysts went into panic mode. Investors started pulling out. The Reese empire, one of the most powerful families in the country, was collapsing under the weight of its own secrets, and Elias didn't care. He spent the next 3 days dismantling everything. He fired corrupt executives, canceled contracts tied to the old board, opened investigations into financial misconduct. He tore through the company like a man with nothing left to lose, because he didn't. The empire his father built, it was never his to begin with. Half of it belonged to McKenna, and Elias was going to make sure she got every penny. He wasn't doing this to win her back. He wasn't doing this to make himself feel better. He was doing it because it was the truth, and the truth mattered more than power, more than money, more than the Reese name. His legal team worked around the clock preparing the transfer documents. Accountants calculated assets. Lawyers drafted contracts that would ensure McKenna's inheritance was protected. Elias barely slept, barely ate. He moved through the mansion like a ghost, focused on one thing and one thing only: making this right. Even if McKenna never forgave him, even if she never came back, even if he never saw her again, she deserved justice, and he was going to give it to her. By the 4th day, the media was everywhere. Cameras lined the estate gates. Reporters shouted questions. Headlines screamed about scandal and collapse. Elias ignored all of it. He sat in his office, signing the final documents that would transfer half of his wealth to a woman he barely knew but couldn't stop thinking about. The door burst open. Elias looked up, irritated. I said no interruptions. His private investigator stood in the doorway, breathing hard like he'd just run up 3 flights of stairs. Sir, the investigator said, eyes wide. We found her. Elias's heart stopped. Where? He asked, voice barely a whisper. The investigator held out a tablet, showing a location pin on a map. Savannah, Georgia. Small coastal town. She's working at an art and coffee kiosk near the beach. Elias stared at the screen. McKenna. She was alive. She was safe. And she was 200 miles away. Elias stood up slowly, hands trembling. Book me a flight, he said quietly. Now. The investigator nodded and rushed out. Elias stood there alone, staring at the location on the screen. He didn't know what he'd say when he saw her. Didn't know if she'd even let him speak. But he had to try. Because even if she hated him, even if she never forgave him, she deserved to know the truth. All of it. Elias stepped off the plane in Savannah with nothing but a carry-on bag and an address. No security, no driver, no assistant. Just him. He rented a car and drove through the quiet coastal town, windows down, salt air filling his lungs. The city felt like the opposite of New York. Slower. Softer. Like time moved differently here. He followed the GPS to a small street near the beach. And there it was. A tiny art and coffee kiosk with hand-painted signs and mismatched furniture scattered outside. String lights hung from the awning. Plants spilled out of colorful pots. It looked like someone had built a home out of creativity and peace. Phew. Elias parked across the street and sat there for a moment, just watching. And then he saw her. McKenna. She stood behind the counter, hair pulled back in a messy bun, wearing a paint-stained apron over a simple dress. Her hands moved across a canvas propped on an easel, brushstrokes confident and free. She was painting, not cleaning, not serving, not invisible. She was creating. Elias's chest tightened. This was who she was supposed to be. Not a maid scrubbing floors in a mansion that should have been hers. Not a girl carrying the weight of secrets she didn't ask for. This. Free. Peaceful. Alive. And for a moment, Elias wondered if he had any right to disrupt that. She looked happy, or at least she looked like she was trying to be. A customer walked up and McKenna set down her brush to hand them a cup of coffee. She smiled. It wasn't the polite, forced smile she wore at the estate. It was real. Warm. Elias felt something crack inside him. He'd spent the last week tearing down an empire to give her justice. But maybe justice wasn't enough. Maybe what she needed was peace. And maybe the best thing he could do was leave her alone. But then he thought about his father's letter. Tell her I'm sorry. Tell her she was loved. Tell her the truth. Elias couldn't leave without doing that. He took a deep breath, opened the car door, and stepped out. His legs felt heavy as he crossed the street. His heart pounded so loud he thought she might hear it before she saw him. The closer he got, the more nervous he became. What if she told him to leave? What if she didn't want to hear anything he had to say? What if seeing him only brought back the pain? Elias stopped a few feet from the kiosk, watching her through the open window. She was humming again. The same song she used to hum in the mansion, the one her mother taught her, and it broke him. Because this was the version of McKenna the world tried to erase, the version his family tried to silence, and she was still here, still standing, still creating beauty out of pain. Have you ever seen someone finally at peace after a lifetime of struggle? It's heartbreaking and beautiful at the same time, because you realize how much they had to survive just to get there. Elias cleared his throat softly. McKenna didn't hear him at first. She kept painting, lost in her own world. He tried again, a little louder. McKenna. Her hand froze mid-stroke. The brush hovered over the canvas, paint dripping slowly. Then, slowly, she turned, and the moment her eyes landed on him, everything stopped. Her face went pale, her breath caught. The brush slipped from her fingers and clattered onto the counter. For a long moment, neither of them moved, neither of them spoke. Elias stood there, hands at his sides, looking at her like she was the only thing in the world that mattered, and McKenna stared back, eyes wide with shock, fear, and something else she couldn't name. Elias, she whispered. His name sounded broken, coming from her lips. Hi, he said quietly. McKenna's hands gripped the edge of the counter like she needed something to hold on to. What are you doing here? She asked, voice shaking. Elias swallowed hard. I needed to see you. Why? Because I found something, he said. Something you need to know. McKenna's eyes filled with tears. I don't want to know anything else. I just want to be left alone. I know, Elias said softly. And I'll leave. I promise. But first, please, just hear me out. McKenna looked away, blinking back tears. Elias, I can't do this. I'm not asking you to forgive me, he said. I'm not asking you to come back. I'm not asking for anything. He pulled an envelope from his jacket and held it out. I'm just asking you to read this. McKenna stared at the envelope like it might explode. What is it? She whispered. Elias's voice cracked. A letter from your father. McKenna's breath stopped. Arthur wrote it before he died, Elias continued. He wanted you to know the truth. All of it. McKenna's hands trembled as she slowly reached for the envelope. The moment her fingers touched it, a tear slipped down her cheek. Elias stepped back, giving her space. I'll go, he said quietly. But please, read it. He turned to walk away, and McKenna's voice stopped him. Wait. Elias froze. McKenna stood there, clutching the envelope to her chest, tears streaming down her face. Don't go, she whispered. Elias turned back slowly, heart pounding. McKenna's voice broke. Not yet. Elias froze at her words. Don't go. Not yet. He turned slowly, afraid that if he moved too fast, she'd change her mind. McKenna stood there clutching the envelope, tears streaming down her face, looking at him like she didn't know whether to trust him or run. Please, she whispered. Just stay while I read it. Elias nodded. Okay. McKenna walked to one of the mismatched chairs outside the kiosk and sat down. Her hands shook as she opened the envelope. Elias stayed standing, giving her space, but close enough that she knew he wasn't leaving. She pulled out the letter. Arthur's handwriting filled the page, and as McKenna began to read, her entire body trembled. Elias watched her face change with every line. Shock, pain, confusion, grief. She covered her mouth with one hand, trying to hold back sobs. When she reached the part where Arthur admitted he saw her when she was 16, a broken sound escaped her throat. "He watched me," she whispered. "He knew where I was, and he just watched." Elias's chest tightened. "He wanted to approach you, but your mother made him promise not to." McKenna looked up at him, eyes red and swollen. "Why would she do that?" "Because she was protecting you," Elias said quietly. "From the board, from the family, from people who would have tried to take you away or destroy you, just like they did to her." McKenna shook her head, fresh tears spilling. "I don't understand. If he loved me, why didn't he fight harder?" "He was weak," Elias said honestly. "He chose the empire over the people he loved, and it destroyed him." McKenna wiped her face roughly. "He doesn't deserve my forgiveness." "No," Elias agreed. "He doesn't. But he wanted you to know the truth. That you weren't unwanted. That you weren't a mistake." McKenna's voice cracked. "I spent my whole life thinking I was." Elias knelt down in front of her, slow and careful. "You weren't. You were loved. By him. By your mother. And you deserved so much more than what they gave you." McKenna looked at him through blurred vision. "Why are you here, Elias?" "Really?" Elias took a deep breath. "Because I needed you to know something else." "What?" "I stepped down," he said quietly. "From the company. From everything." McKenna blinked. "What are you talking about?" "I'm no longer CEO of Reese Enterprises," Elias continued. "I returned my controlling shares, fired the corrupt board members, and I'm transferring half of everything I own to you." McKenna's breath stopped. "You're what?" "You're Arthur's daughter," Elias said. "That empire was supposed to be shared. Half of it was always supposed to be yours." McKenna stood up abruptly, shaking her head. No, I don't want it." "It's not about wanting it," Elias said, standing with her. "It's about what's right." "Right?" McKenna's voice rose. "Nothing about this is right. My mother is dead, your father is dead, and no amount of money will bring them back." "I know," Elias said, "but it's justice. It's the truth, and you deserve it." McKenna pressed her hands against her temples, trying to process everything. "I don't want your money, Elias. I don't want the Reese name. I just want to be left alone." "I know," Elias whispered, "and after today I will. I'll leave you alone. But the paperwork is already done. The lawyers have everything. Whether you accept it or not, half of that empire is legally yours." McKenna stared at him, stunned. "You really did this?" "I did." "Why?" Elias's voice cracked. "Because you deserved better than what my family gave you, and I couldn't live with myself knowing I benefited from your pain." McKenna's eyes filled with fresh tears. "You didn't do this, Elias." "They did." "But I inherited it," Elias said. "I lived in that mansion. I spent that money. I carried that name, and I can't undo the past. But I can try to make the future right." McKenna looked away, struggling to breathe under the weight of it all. "I don't know what to say," she whispered. "You don't have to say anything," Elias said softly. "I just needed you to know the truth. All of it." Silence settled between them. Heavy. Painful. Full of things neither of them knew how to say. Then McKenna's voice broke through, barely audible. "If you gave up everything," she whispered, stepping back slightly. "If you walked away from the empire, the money, the legacy, then what do you have left?" Elias looked at her, really looked at her, and his answer came out as raw and honest as anything he'd ever said in his life. You? The word hung in the air like something sacred. You. Makina's breath caught in her throat. Elias stood there, vulnerable in a way she'd never seen him before. No walls, no armor, no billionaire mask, just a man who'd lost everything and didn't seem to regret it. "What do you mean?" Makina whispered. Elias stepped closer. Not too close, just close enough that she could see the exhaustion in his eyes, the weight he'd been carrying. "The Empire was never my identity," he said quietly. "It was a cage I lived in without knowing. I thought power meant control. I thought money meant security. I thought the Reese name meant something." He shook his head. But it didn't. It was all built on lies, on pain, on people like your mother who were erased so others could stay comfortable. Makina's eyes filled with tears. "Losing the Empire didn't break me," Elias continued, voice cracking. "Losing you did." Makina looked away, trying to hold herself together. "Elias, this is too much." "No," he said softly. "It's the first time in my life something finally makes sense." He reached out slowly, giving her room to pull away. But she didn't. His fingers brushed against hers. Gentle. Hesitant. Like he was afraid she might disappear if he held on too tight. And Makina let him. Her hand trembled in his, but she didn't move. Elias exhaled shakily, like the touch alone brought him back to life. "I'm not here to ask you to forgive the Reese name," he said. "I'm here to ask if you can see the man standing in front of you. Not the empire he let go of. Not the legacy he walked away from. Just me." Makina's throat tightened. "Why does it matter so much to you?" "Because you're the only real thing I've ever known," Elias whispered. "The only person who made me feel human instead of just powerful." Tears spilled down Makina's cheeks. "You walked into that mansion and everything shifted," Elias continued. "I didn't understand it at first. I tried to ignore it. But I couldn't. Because you reminded me what it felt like to care about something more than control." Makina's voice broke. "Elias, I don't know if I can do this." "I'm not asking you to," he said gently. "I'm just telling you the truth. That's all I came here to do." They stood there, hands still touching, the world around them fading into background noise. How many people get the chance to choose love over power? Most people spend their whole lives chasing success, influence, wealth, and then one day they realize none of it matters if they're empty inside. Makina looked down at their hands. His grip was soft, steady, like he was holding something fragile. "You really gave it all up," she whispered. "I did. For me." "For the truth," Elias corrected. "For justice. For the daughter my father should have fought for." Makina's chest heaved with emotion. "Ugh, I don't know what to feel." "You don't have to feel anything," Elias said. "I just needed you to know that you mattered, that your mother mattered, that the pain you carried wasn't your fault." Makina closed her eyes, tears streaming freely now. For the first time in her life, someone was seeing her. Not as a maid, not as a mistake, not as a burden, but as someone worth fighting for. "I'm scared," she admitted quietly. "Of what?" Elias asked. "Of believing you," Makina whispered. "Of letting my guard down. Of trusting someone from the family that destroyed mine." Elias's voice softened. "I understand. And I'm not asking you to trust me yet. I'm just asking for a chance to prove that I'm not them." Makina opened her eyes and looked at him. Really looked, and for the first time, she didn't see Elias Reese, the billionaire heir. She saw Elias, the man who cried in his office, the man who searched for her when she disappeared, the man who gave up everything because it was the right thing to do. "I don't know how this ends," she said softly. "Neither do I," Elias admitted. but I know I don't want to walk away without trying." Makina's lips trembled. She was about to speak when a voice cut through the moment like a knife. "Makina." Both of them froze. Makina turned sharply, and standing a few feet away, holding a coffee cup and staring at them with wide, confused eyes, was Devon Cole, the photographer from the Reese estate. The man who once made Elias's jealousy burn so hot he could barely breathe. Devon's gaze moved from Makina to Elias, then back to Makina, and his expression shifted from surprise to something heavier, understanding. "I didn't know you'd be here," Devon said quietly. Makina pulled her hand away from Elias, panic flashing across her face. "Devon," she said, voice shaking. "I didn't expect to see you either." Devon stepped closer, eyes still locked on Elias. "What's going on?" Elias's jaw tightened, and the fragile moment they'd just shared shattered into 1,000 pieces. Devon Cole stood there with a coffee cup in one hand and confusion written all over his face. Makina looked like she'd been caught doing something wrong. Her hand was still warm from Elias's touch, but she pulled it behind her back like hiding the evidence would erase what Devon just saw. Elias, on the other hand, didn't move. His jaw was tight. His eyes locked on Devon like he was calculating every possible outcome of this moment. And none of them were good. "Devon," Makina said again, forcing a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "What are you doing in Savannah?" Devon's expression softened. "I'm here for a photography project. Coastal landscapes. I didn't know you were here too." He glanced at Elias again, recognition flickering across his face. "Mr. Reese, didn't expect to see you either." Elias gave a curt nod. "Devon." The tension between them was thick enough to cut with a knife. Devon turned his attention back to Makina, concern replacing confusion. "Are you okay? I heard you left the estate suddenly. No one knew where you went." Makina swallowed hard. "I needed space. Things got complicated." "Complicated how?" Devon asked gently. Before Makina could answer, Elias stepped forward. Not aggressively, but enough to make his presence known. "She needed time to process some family matters," Elias said evenly. "I came to deliver important information." Devon raised an eyebrow. "Family matters?" Makina shot Elias a look that said, "Don't say anything." Elias caught it and went silent. Devon looked between them, sensing the layers of something he didn't understand. "Well, I'm glad you're okay. I was worried." Makina's heart softened. Devon had always been kind to her, always treated her like a person instead of staff. He didn't deserve to be caught in the middle of this mess. "Thank you," she said quietly. "That means a lot." Devon smiled, the kind of smile that was warm and genuine, the kind Makina used to appreciate before everything got so complicated. "Listen," Devon said, shifting his weight. "I know this might be bad timing, but I'm in town for a few days. Maybe we could grab dinner, catch up?" Makina hesitated, and in that hesitation, Elias felt something dark twist in his chest. Jealousy, raw, burning, irrational. He had no right to feel it. Makina wasn't his. She didn't owe him anything. She could have dinner with whoever she wanted. But watching Devon look at her with warmth and familiarity made Elias want to break something. "I don't know," Makina said softly. "I'm still figuring things out." "No pressure," Devon said quickly. "Just as friends. I missed talking to you." Elias's hands clenched into fists at his sides. Devon finally acknowledged him directly. "I'm sure Mr. Reese has business to attend to. I didn't mean to interrupt." "You didn't interrupt anything," Makina said, a little too quickly. Elias's jaw tightened, because that wasn't true. Devon had interrupted everything. The moment they were building. The vulnerability they were sharing. the fragile connection that was just starting to form, and now it was fractured. Devon took a step closer to McKenna, his voice soft. "You look good, McKenna. Peaceful. Like you finally found where you're supposed to be." McKenna's eyes glistened. "I'm trying." "Good," Devon said. "You deserve peace." Elias wanted to scream that he knew that he'd given up everything so she could have peace, that he'd burned down an empire because she deserved justice. But he stayed silent, because this wasn't about him. Devon pulled out his phone. "Here, take my number. If you want to grab coffee or dinner, just text me. No expectations." McKenna took the phone and typed in her number. Elias watched, feeling like the ground was crumbling beneath him. Devon smiled when she handed it back. "Great, I'll text you later." He glanced at Elias one more time, polite but distant. "Take care, Mr. Reese." Elias didn't respond. Devon walked away, disappearing down the street with his coffee, and the silence he left behind was suffocating. McKenna stood there, staring at the ground, arms wrapped around herself. Elias didn't know what to say. He wanted to ask if she was going to meet Devon, wanted to tell her that watching another man look at her like that made him feel like he was losing his mind, but he had no right. He gave up that right the moment he walked away from the empire. He chose truth over power, and now he had to live with the consequences. "McKenna," Elias said quietly. She didn't look at him. "I should go," he continued, voice strained. "I've said what I came to say." McKenna's breath hitched. Elias turned to leave, but before he could take a step, McKenna's voice stopped him. "I need a moment." Elias froze. McKenna's voice trembled. I need a moment to think." Elias nodded slowly, even though she wasn't looking at him. "Take all the time you need." And then McKenna walked away. Not toward Devon's direction, not toward the kiosk. She just walked. Down the street, past the shops, toward the beach where the waves crashed against the shore and the world felt too big and too small all at once. Elias stood there, watching her go. And for the second time in his life, he felt completely powerless. Behind him, Devon had stopped at the corner, watching McKenna walk away too. Two men. Both staring after the same woman. Both wanting her for different reasons. And McKenna caught in the middle, trying to figure out what she wanted for herself. McKenna walked until her legs hurt. She didn't know where she was going. Didn't care. She just needed to move. Needed to breathe. Needed to escape the weight of two men staring at her like she held the answers to questions she didn't even understand. She ended up at the beach. The ocean stretched out endlessly, waves crashing against the shore in a rhythm that felt ancient and comforting. McKenna sat down in the sand, pulled her knees to her chest, and let the tears come. She cried for her mother, for the life Callista never got to live, for the secrets that destroyed her. She cried for Arthur, for the father she never knew, for the love he was too weak to fight for, and she cried for herself, for the girl who grew up invisible, for the woman still trying to figure out if she deserved to be seen. The wind blew salt air against her face, and for a moment McKenna let herself feel everything. Devon was safe, comfortable. He offered warmth without complications. He looked at her like she was enough exactly as she was. But Elias? Elias made her soul tremble. He wasn't safe. He wasn't simple. He came with a legacy soaked in pain and a family name that had destroyed hers. But when he looked at her, she felt seen in a way she'd never experienced before, like she wasn't just enough, like she was everything. And that terrified her, because how do you let yourself fall for someone whose world tried to erase you? McKenna sat there for an hour, maybe more, watching the waves and trying to untangle the mess in her heart. Then she stood up, brushed the sand off her dress, and walked back. When she reached the kiosk, both men were still there. Devon leaned against a lamppost, scrolling through his phone. Elias stood near the kiosk, hands in his pockets, staring at the ground like he was waiting for a verdict. They both looked up when they saw her. McKenna took a deep breath and walked toward Devon first. He straightened, hopeful. "Hey, you okay?" McKenna nodded. "Yeah, I just needed to clear my head." Devon smiled gently. "I get it. This town does that to you." McKenna's voice was soft but steady. "Devon, you're a good man. You've always been kind to me, and I appreciate that more than you know." Devon's smile faltered. He knew where this was going. "But I can't have dinner with you," McKenna continued. "Not because you did anything wrong, but because I'm not in a place where I can give you what you deserve." Devon nodded slowly, disappointment clear in his eyes. "I understand." "I'm sorry," McKenna whispered. "Don't be," Devon said, forcing a smile. "You have to do what's right for you." He glanced over at Elias, then back at McKenna. "Take care of yourself, okay?" "You too," McKenna said. Devon gave her one last look, then walked away down the street, hands in his pockets, shoulders slightly slumped. McKenna watched him go, guilt twisting in her chest. Then she turned to face Elias. He stood there, eyes filled with something fragile, hope mixed with fear. McKenna walked toward him slowly. "I'm not ready for this," she said quietly. Elias's face fell. "But," McKenna continued, voice trembling, "I don't want you to leave yet." Elias's breath caught. McKenna looked down at her hands. "I spent my whole life blaming myself for things that weren't my fault. My mother's struggle, my father's absence, the poverty, the invisibility." Her voice cracked. "I convinced myself I was the problem, that if I'd never been born, my mother would have been happy, that I was the mistake that ruined everything." Sometimes we carry guilt for things we didn't cause. We blame ourselves for being born into broken situations, for existing in spaces that didn't want us. But healing starts when we stop punishing ourselves for other people's choices. Elias stepped closer, voice gentle. "McKenna, you weren't the problem. You were never the problem." McKenna's tears fell freely now. "I know that in my head, but my heart doesn't believe it yet." Elias reached out slowly and took her hand. "Then let me help you believe it." McKenna looked up at him, eyes searching his face. "Why do you care so much?" "Because you remind me what it means to be human," Elias said, "and I don't want to lose that. I don't want to lose you." McKenna's breath shook. "I'm not asking you to trust me completely," Elias continued. "I'm not asking you to forgive the Reese name. I'm just asking for a chance to prove that I'm not them, that I see you, that I care." McKenna closed her eyes, feeling the weight of his words settle over her. When she opened them again, she squeezed his hand gently. "Okay," she whispered. Elias's eyes widened. "Okay?" "I'm not ready for everything," McKenna clarified, "but I'm willing to try, to see where this goes. Slowly." Elias exhaled shakily, relief flooding his face. "Slowly. I can do that." They stood there, hands intertwined, the ocean breeze wrapping around them. For the first time in weeks, McKenna felt like maybe, just maybe, she could let herself hope. But then her expression shifted. Something darker crossed her face. Something heavy. "Elias," she said quietly. "Yeah?" McKenna's voice trembled. "There's something I need to tell you before any of this goes further." Elias's grip tightened slightly. "What is it?" McKenna hesitated, fear flickering in her eyes. "Something I've never told anyone," she whispered. Elias's heart pounded. "You can tell me." McKenna took a shaky breath, and the words that came next changed everything. McKenna's voice came out barely above a whisper. "My mother didn't just leave the Reese estate because she was forced out," she said, eyes fixed on the ground. She left because she was terrified. Elias's grip on her hand tightened slightly. Terrified of what? Of them finding out she was pregnant, Makina said, voice shaking. Of them taking me away. Of them deciding I didn't deserve to exist. Elias's chest tightened. She ran, Makina continued, moved to a different state, changed her phone number, cut off everyone she knew. She lived in constant fear that someone would show up and take me from her. Tears streamed down Makina's face. I didn't understand it when I was little. I just knew we moved a lot, that she never talked about my father, that she worked 3 jobs and still cried at night when she thought I was asleep. Elias felt his own eyes burn. I remember one night, Makina whispered. I must have been 7 or 8. I woke up and found her sitting at the kitchen table in the dark, just staring at nothing. I asked her what was wrong. Makina's voice cracked. She looked at me with the saddest eyes I've ever seen and said, I'm sorry, baby. I'm so sorry I can't give you more. Elias's jaw clenched, fighting back emotion. I didn't know what she meant then, Makina said. But I felt it. The weight she carried, the guilt, the exhaustion. And somewhere deep inside, I started believing it was my fault. Makina. I watched her work herself to death. Makina cut him off, voice rising with pain. She cleaned houses until her hands bled. She skipped meals so I could eat. She wore the same clothes for years so I could have new shoes for school. Tears poured down her cheeks. And the whole time, I felt like a burden. Like if I'd never been born, she could have been happy. She could have had a real life instead of running and hiding and struggling every single day. Elias pulled her into his arms before he could stop himself. Makina collapsed against his chest, sobbing. She sacrificed everything for me, Makina choked out, and I couldn't save her. I couldn't stop her from getting sick. I couldn't afford the treatments. I couldn't do anything but watch her die. Elias held her tighter, his own tears falling silently. I blamed myself, Makina whispered. For existing. For being the reason she suffered. For not being enough to make her life worth living. Elias pulled back just enough to look at her, hands gently cupping her face. Listen to me, he said, voice firm but tender. Your mother didn't suffer because of you. She suffered because of a system that punished her for loving the wrong person. Because of people who decided her life didn't matter. Makina shook her head. But if I hadn't been born, if you hadn't been born, Elias interrupted, your mother wouldn't have had a reason to keep fighting. You gave her purpose. You gave her love. You gave her something worth protecting. Makina's breath hitched. You weren't the burden, Elias continued, wiping her tears with his thumbs. You were her reason to survive, and she would have done it all over again just to have you. Makina closed her eyes, letting his words sink in. You didn't destroy her life, Elias whispered. The people who silenced her did, and they will never hold power again. I promise you that. Makina opened her eyes, looking at him through blurred vision. For the first time in her life, she started to believe that maybe she wasn't the mistake she'd always thought she was. Maybe she was just a daughter who was loved, a daughter who deserved to exist. Elias pressed his forehead against hers, breathing slowly. You're not alone anymore, Makina. You don't have to carry this by yourself. Makina's voice came out broken, but honest. I don't know how to let it go. Then we'll figure it out together, Elias said softly. One day at a time. They stood there, wrapped in each other, the world around them fading into silence. For a moment, everything felt still, peaceful, safe. And then a loud car door slammed behind them. Both of them jumped, pulling apart. Makina turned sharply. A sleek black car was parked near the kiosk, the kind of car that didn't belong in a quiet beach town, and stepping out of it was a woman, tall, elegant, wearing a tailored suit and carrying a leather briefcase. She looked like she'd walked straight out of a courtroom, and her eyes were locked directly on Makina. Not Elias. Makina. The woman approached slowly, heels clicking against the pavement. Elias moved instinctively in front of Makina, protective. "Can I help you?" The woman ignored him completely. Her gaze stayed fixed on Makina, expression unreadable but intense. "Makina Davis?" the woman asked, voice calm and professional. Makina's heart pounded. "Yes?" The woman stopped a few feet away. "My name is Olivia Pierce," she said. "I was Arthur Reese's private attorney." Elias stiffened. "My father had no attorney by that name." Olivia's eyes flickered to him briefly. "Because I wasn't on any public records. Arthur trusted me privately." She turned back to Makina. "I've been looking for you for a long time." Makina's breath caught. "Why?" Olivia reached into her briefcase and pulled out an envelope. "Because your mother sent this to Arthur years ago," Olivia said. "He tried to respond, but the board intercepted everything. I found it after his death, but I didn't know where you were." She held out the envelope. Makina stared at it, hands trembling. "What is it?" she whispered. Olivia's expression softened. "The truth." Makina stared at the envelope like it might burn her if she touched it. Olivia Pierce stood there, calm and patient, holding out a piece of her mother's past like it was the most natural thing in the world. Elias stepped closer to Makina, protective. "How do we know this is real?" Olivia's eyes shifted to him. "Because I was there when Arthur wrote his response. I witnessed him try to send it, and I watched the board intercept every single attempt." Her voice hardened. "They didn't just erase your father's love, Mr. Reese. They erased his ability to fix it." Elias's jaw clenched. Olivia turned back to Makina. "I've carried this letter for 3 years, waiting, searching, hoping I'd find you before it was too late." "Too late for what?" Makina whispered. "For you to know the truth," Olivia said softly. "That your mother loved him until her last breath, and that he never stopped loving her." Makina's hands trembled as she reached out and took the envelope. It was old, worn, the edges frayed from years of being handled carefully. Her mother's handwriting was on the front. Arthur Reese. Makina's vision blurred with tears. Elias placed a hand on her shoulder. "You don't have to read it now." "Yes, I do," Makina said quietly. She opened the envelope with shaking fingers and pulled out the letter. The paper was thin, delicate, like it had been folded and unfolded 100 times. Makina took a deep breath and began to read. "Arthur, I'm writing this because I need you to understand something. I didn't leave because I stopped loving you. I left because I loved you too much to let them destroy you." Makina's chest tightened. "They gave me a choice. Walk away quietly, or watch them tear down everything you built. I couldn't do that to you. I couldn't be the reason your legacy crumbled. So, I left, and I took our daughter with me." Makina's breath hitched. I named her Makina. It means happy one. Because even though my heart was breaking, she was the only light I had left. Every time I looked at her, I saw you. Your eyes, your strength, your quiet kindness. Tears streamed down Makina's face. "I need you to know something, Arthur. If things had been different, if we'd lived in a world that didn't punish love, I would have spent the rest of my life by your side. I would have built a home with you, raised our daughter together, grown old watching sunsets on that ridiculous balcony you always talked about. But we don't get that world. We got this one. And in this one, I have to protect her from the people who think she doesn't deserve to exist." Makina's hand shook so hard she almost dropped the letter. "I'm writing this because I need you to promise me something. If anything happens to me, if I'm not here to tell her the truth, please find her. Please tell her that her father loved her, that she wasn't a mistake, that she was wanted. Tell her I'm sorry I couldn't give. Her the life she deserved. Tell her I loved her more than anything in this world, and tell her that you did too." McKenna sobbed openly now, the letter trembling in her hands. Have you ever read words from someone you loved after they were gone? Words they never got to say out loud? It's like hearing their voice one last time, and it breaks you in ways you didn't know were possible. Elias's hand tightened on her shoulder. McKenna forced herself to keep reading. "Arthur, I know you'll try to find us. I know you'll want to fight, but please don't. The board will destroy you, and I can't live with that. So I'm asking you to let us go. Let me protect her. Let me give her a quiet life away from the people who would hurt her. And if she ever finds you, if she ever learns the truth, tell her I did it out of love. Not fear. Not shame. Love." The letter ended with 5 words that shattered McKenna completely. "I will always love you." McKenna collapsed onto the bench near the kiosk, sobbing into her hands. Olivia stood quietly, letting her grieve. Elias knelt beside McKenna, placing his hand gently on her back. "She loved him," McKenna choked out. "She loved him so much she walked away." "I know," Elias whispered. "And he never got to tell her he loved her back," McKenna said, voice breaking. Olivia spoke softly. "He tried. Every year on her birthday he wrote letters. He hired investigators, he searched, but the board blocked everything." McKenna looked up at her, eyes red and swollen. "Did he know she died?" Olivia's expression darkened. "Yes, he found out 3 months after she passed. It destroyed him." McKenna's breath caught. "What did he do?" "He wrote one final letter," Olivia said. "To you." She pulled another envelope from her briefcase. "This one he made sure no one could intercept," Olivia continued. "He gave it to me personally. Made me promise I'd find you and give it to you myself." McKenna stared at the second envelope. "What does it say?" she whispered. "I don't know," Olivia said. "He sealed it before I could read it, but he told me to give you one message first." McKenna's voice trembled. "What message?" Olivia's eyes softened. "If you ever find our daughter," she quoted, "tell her her father never stopped loving her." McKenna's world went silent. She stared at Olivia, chest heaving, tears pouring down her face. And for the first time in her life, McKenna understood. She wasn't unloved. She wasn't forgotten. She was the daughter 2 people loved so much they sacrificed everything to protect her, even if it meant never getting to hold her. McKenna couldn't stop crying. She sat on the bench, clutching the letter from her mother, body shaking with sobs that came from somewhere deep and broken inside her. She wasn't unwanted. She wasn't abandoned. She wasn't a mistake. She was loved, deeply, desperately, sacrificially, by 2 people who gave up everything to protect her. Olivia stood quietly nearby, giving McKenna space to process the truth she'd carried for so long. Elias knelt beside her, his own eyes wet with tears he didn't try to hide. "I'm so sorry," he whispered, voice breaking. "I'm so sorry for what my family did to yours." McKenna looked at him through blurred vision. "You didn't do this." "But I benefited from it," Elias said, echoing the words he'd said before. "I lived in that mansion. I spent that money. I carried that name while you and your mother suffered." He wiped his face roughly. "And I hate that. I hate that I didn't know. I hate that I couldn't stop it." McKenna shook her head. "You were a child, Elias. You didn't know any of this existed." "But I know now," Elias said, "and I can't undo it. I can't bring your mother back. I can't give you the childhood you deserved." His voice cracked. "All I can do is promise you that the people who did this will never hold power again. That your mother's name will be honored. That you'll get everything that was stolen from you." McKenna's chest heaved. "I don't want the money." "I know," Elias said softly. "But you deserve it. Not because of the Reese name. Because it's the truth." McKenna stared at him. Really stared, And for the first time since she found out who he was, she believed him. She believed that he wasn't like them, that he cared, that he was fighting for her not because he had to, but because he wanted to. Slowly, Makina reached out and touched his face. Elias froze. Her fingers were soft against his cheek, trembling slightly, but steady enough to let him know she meant it. "You gave up everything," she whispered. "I'd do it again," Elias said without hesitation. Makina's tears fell slower now, quieter. "Why?" "Because you matter," Elias said. "Because the truth matters. And because He stopped, the words catching in his throat. Makina's hand stayed on his face. "Because you what?" Elias closed his eyes, leaning into her touch like it was the only thing keeping him grounded. "Because I care about you more than I've ever cared about anything in my life," he whispered. Makina's breath hitched. Elias opened his eyes, looking at her with raw vulnerability. "I didn't plan this. I didn't expect it. But somewhere between the mansion and here, between the lies and the truth, I started falling for you." Makina's heart pounded so hard she thought it might break through her chest. "And I know I have no right," Elias continued. "I know my family destroyed yours. I know you have every reason to walk away and never look back." He placed his hand over hers, still resting on his cheek. "But I can't stop how I feel. And I don't want to." Makina's vision blurred again, but this time it wasn't just from sadness. It was from hope. From the possibility that maybe, just maybe, something good could come from all this pain. She leaned forward slowly, resting her forehead against his. "Elias," she whispered. "Yeah?" Her voice trembled. "I think I'm falling for you too." Elias's breath stopped. He pulled back just enough to look at her, eyes wide, with disbelief and relief. "You are?" he asked, voice barely audible. Makina nodded, tears streaming down her face. "I didn't want to. I tried not to, but I can't help it." Elias cupped her face gently with both hands. "Makina, I'm scared," she admitted. "I'm scared of trusting you. I'm scared of getting hurt. I'm scared of letting myself believe this is real." "It's real," Elias said firmly. "I promise you, it's real." Makina searched his eyes, looking for any sign of doubt. There was none. Just honesty, vulnerability, love. She closed her eyes, letting herself feel it, letting herself believe it. For the first time in her life, Makina allowed herself to hope that maybe she deserved to be loved. And then a voice shattered the moment. "Makina?" Both of them froze. Makina pulled back, heart dropping. She turned slowly, and standing a few feet away, holding a bouquet of flowers and staring at them with wide, shocked eyes, was Devon. He looked between Makina and Elias, taking in the closeness, the tears, the intimacy, and his face fell. "I came back," Devon said quietly. "I wanted to apologize for earlier, for putting pressure on you when you clearly needed space." He held out the flowers awkwardly. "I thought maybe we could talk, but I see you're busy." Makina stood up quickly, guilt flooding her chest. "Devon, It's fine," Devon said, forcing a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "I get it." But he didn't look fine. He looked hurt. Elias stood slowly, tension radiating off him. Devon's eyes locked onto Elias and something dark flickered across his face. "So this is what it is," Devon said, voice tight. "You chose him." Makina's voice trembled. "It's not like that." "Isn't it?" Devon asked. "Because from where I'm standing, it looks exactly like that." The air between them crackled with tension, and Makina stood in the middle, torn between two men who wanted her for very different reasons. Devon stood there, flowers in hand, staring at Makina and Elias like he'd just watched his world shift into something he didn't recognize. Makina stepped toward him, guilt written all over her face. Devon, I'm sorry. I didn't mean for you to find out like this. Devon exhaled slowly, shaking his head. No, don't apologize. He looked at the flowers in his hand, then back at her. I came here hoping for something that was never mine to hope for. Makina's voice trembled. You're a good person, Devon. I deserve honesty, Devon interrupted gently. And you just gave me that. He glanced at Elias, jaw tight but eyes clear. Take care of her. Elias met his gaze. I will. Devon nodded once, then held out the flowers to Makina. These were for you anyway. Keep them. Makina took them with shaking hands. Thank you. For everything. Devon forced a smile. Sad but genuine. I hope you find what you're looking for, Makina. Really. And then he walked away. Down the street, past the kiosk, into the fading evening light. Makina watched him go, heart heavy, but clear. Sometimes letting go of something good is the only way to reach for something real. Elias stepped beside her, close but not overwhelming. Are you okay? Makina nodded slowly. Yeah, I think I am. She turned to face him, eyes still wet but no longer filled with confusion. I meant what I said, she whispered. I'm falling for you. Elias's breath caught. Even knowing everything? Even knowing what my family did? You're not your family, Makina said firmly. You proved that. You gave up everything to do what was right, and that matters more than the name you were born with. Elias stepped closer, voice soft. I don't have the empire anymore. I don't have the mansion. I don't have anything but the truth and a chance to start over. Makina reached for his hand. That's more than enough. Elias looked down at their intertwined fingers, then back at her face. McKenna Davis, he said quietly. I love you. The words hung in the air, simple and honest. Makina's heart swelled. I love you too. And for the first time in both their lives, love didn't come with conditions. It didn't come with power or wealth or status. It came with truth, with healing, with the willingness to build something new from the ruins of something broken. Elias pulled her into his arms, holding her like she was the only thing in the world that mattered. Makina rested her head against his chest, listening to his heartbeat, feeling the weight of the past finally starting to lift. Olivia, who had been standing quietly nearby, cleared her throat gently. They both turned. I'll leave you two alone, Olivia said with a small smile. But Makina, if you need anything, legal help, documents, answers, you know how to reach me. Makina nodded. Thank you. For everything. Olivia walked back to her car, leaving them standing together under the string lights of the kiosk. The ocean breeze wrapped around them. The world felt quieter now, softer, like the storm had finally passed. Elias cupped Makina's face gently. Where do we go from here? Makina smiled through her tears. Wherever we want. Together. And that was the beauty of it. They weren't bound by the past anymore. They weren't trapped by secrets or lies or the weight of a legacy built on pain. They were free. Free to choose. Free to love. Free to build a future that honored the truth instead of hiding from it. Sometimes closure doesn't come from answers. It comes from choosing to move forward even when the past still hurts. And that's the bravest thing anyone can do. Makina leaned up and kissed Elias softly. He kissed her back, gentle and sure, like he'd been waiting his whole life for this moment. When they pulled apart, both of them were smiling. Let's go inside, Makina said. I want to show you something I've been working on. Elias followed her into the kiosk where canvases lined the walls and paint covered every surface. Art, color, life. This was who Makina was, when the world wasn't trying to erase her. Elias looked around, eyes wide. You made all of this? McKenna nodded. It's how I process things, how I heal. Elias picked up one of the canvases. It was a portrait of a woman, Callista, smiling in a way McKenna must have remembered from childhood. She's beautiful, Elias whispered. She was, McKenna said softly. And now I finally understand why she did what she did. Not because she didn't love me, but because she loved me too much to let them destroy me. Elias set the canvas down and pulled McKenna close again. She'd be proud of you. McKenna closed her eyes, letting the words settle over her like a blanket. For the first time in years, she believed it. They stood there together, wrapped in each other, surrounded by art and truth and the beginning of something new. And then McKenna's phone buzzed. She pulled it out of her pocket, expecting a message from Olivia, or maybe one of her co-workers. But the number was blocked, and the message made her blood run cold. We need to meet. There's one last truth you don't know. McKenna's hands started shaking. Elias noticed immediately. What is it? McKenna showed him the screen. Elias's face went pale. Who sent this? Another message came through. I was on the board 26 years ago, and I know what really happened the night your mother left. McKenna's breath stopped. Elias tightened his grip on her. Don't respond. This could be a trap. But McKenna couldn't look away from the screen. A third message appeared. If you want the whole truth, meet me tomorrow. Alone. I'll send the address. McKenna's heart pounded. She thought she knew everything. She thought the truth had finally been revealed. But now, standing in the quiet kiosk with Elias beside her, she realized something terrifying. The story wasn't over yet, and whatever truth was still hidden. It was about to change everything.